My name is Clara Vance and I died knowing I had thrown away the only good thing in my life. The last thing I saw wasn't the blur of headlights or the shatter of glass. It was my husband's face, Liam, his stern features etched with a despair so profound it finally broke through the selfish haze I had lived in for years. In that splinter of a second between impact and oblivion I understood everything. The depth of his love, the weight of his silence, the countless ways I had punished him for my own unhappiness. And then I was back. The scent of stale coffee and lemon polish assaulted my senses. I was standing in our modest living room, my heart hammering against my ribs not from a car crash, but from the fury I had been spewing moments before. The scene was sickeningly familiar. Liam sat at the small dining table, his posture ramrod straight in his army uniform. The green fabric seemed to absorb the lamplight, just as it absorbed all his emotions. Between us, on the scratched wooden surface, lay 2 documents. The divorce papers. My pen was poised over the signature line. My best friend, Sophia, was hovering just inside the doorway, her voice a cloying, sympathetic murmur. "Clara, darling, maybe you should calm down. Think this through. Liam is only trying to do what's best for you both." In my previous life, her words had been gasoline on the fire of my rage. Now I heard the sly satisfaction beneath them. He was waiting for us to break. He wanted the pieces for herself. Liam's gaze was fixed on a point somewhere beyond my shoulder, his jaw a hard line. "Just sign them, Clara," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all hope. "We both know this is what you want." The memory of his face in my final moment, the love, the loss, flooded me with a pain more acute than any physical injury. I looked at the papers, at the instrument of our mutual destruction. I moved. In one swift, decisive motion, I snatched both copies from the table. The rustle of the pages was the only sound in the suddenly still room. Then I tore them. I ripped them in half, then quarters, not stopping until they were a heap of confetti at my feet. Liam's head snapped up, his eyes wide with stunned disbelief. Sophia let out a sharp, involuntary gasp. I didn't look at her. My entire world had narrowed to the man in front of me. I walked around the table, my legs feeling like jelly, and before he could react I threw my arms around him, burying my face in the rough fabric of his uniform jacket. He was solid, real, alive. The scent of him, starch, soap, and the faint, clean smell of his skin unraveled something inside me. "I'm not divorcing you," I whispered, my voice thick with tears I could no longer hold back. "I'm never leaving you, Liam. Not even if you throw me out. I'm staying right here." His entire body went rigid, a statue of shock and suspicion. He didn't return the embrace. His hands remained at his sides, clenched into fists. "Clara," he began, his voice a low, warning rumble against my ear. "I mean it," I pressed on, clinging tighter. "I'm going to be the wife you deserve. I'll even give you 3 children. 3 strong, healthy sons." A strangled sound escaped him. He tried to push me away, his hands coming up to my shoulders, but his grip lacked its usual firmness. He was thrown completely off balance. Sophia found her voice, shrill and panicked. "Clara, have you lost your mind? Let go of him this instant." I ignored her, turning my head just enough to speak softly into Liam's ear, my words for him alone. "The wound on your left side from the bullet grazed last week. It's 3 centimeters long. It's still seeping, isn't it? And last night the pain kept you awake. You were in your study at 2 in the morning, smoking in the dark." His breath hitched. His hands stilled on my shoulders. "That mission was classified. No one knew about the injury. He had told no one, not even me. Not the old me who wouldn't have cared." I felt the shift in him, the minute relaxation of his defensive posture. I pressed my advantage, my voice dropping even lower. "And your right shoulder. The old injury from the training accident 3 years ago. It aches like a rotten tooth when the weather turns, doesn't it? You need to stop pretending it doesn't. If you keep forcing it, you won't be able to lift your arm properly when you're older." I had pieced it all together after his death, from the quiet, respectful stories his comrades shared and the small, personal effects I had never bothered to look through before. He was a man who carried every burden alone. The pressure of his hands on my shoulders vanished entirely. He was still tense, but the fight to shove me away was gone. He looked down at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something other than cold resignation or weary disappointment in his deep-set eyes. I saw shock, confusion, and a fragile, hesitant spark of something I dared not name. Sophia, seeing his inaction, panicked. She rushed forward. Liam, don't listen to her. She's just acting. She doesn't want the divorce because she has nowhere else to go. She's manipulating you. I finally released Liam and turned to face her. The mask of concerned friendship she wore was so transparent to me now. Sophia, I said, my voice cold and clear. This is a private matter between my husband and me. Since when does an outsider get a vote? Her face paled, then flushed a blotchy red. I was only worried about you both, she stammered, her eyes darting pleadingly to Liam. But Liam's gaze was fixed on me, filled with a scrutiny so intense it felt like he was seeing me for the first time. He ignored her completely. Go wait in the bedroom, Clara, he said, his tone calm but leaving no room for argument. He was dismissing me to deal with Sophia. Alone. I nodded, the picture of obedience, and walked to our bedroom. Once the door was closed, I didn't collapse on the bed. I pressed my ear against the cool wood, listening. Liam, you can't possibly believe her. Sophia's voice was sharp with anxiety. She's up to something, I'm telling you. She just wants to stay so she can keep spending your money. Enough. Liam's voice was like a shard of ice. This is my family. I'll handle it. You should go home now. There was a moment of stunned silence from the hallway, followed by the sound of muffled sobs and the furious click of Sophia's heels retreating. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. In my past life, he would have let her poisonous words fester, leading to another bitter fight. This was different. This was a start. The door opened and Liam walked in, closing it softly behind him. The room felt smaller with him in it, the air charged with unspoken questions. How did you know? He asked bluntly, his arms crossed over his chest. The dim light from the single bedside lamp carved shadows under his cheekbones, making him look both formidable and exhausted. I knew my sudden change was too drastic. Trust, once shattered, doesn't mend with a few words. Instead of answering, I walked to the nightstand and pulled out a small brown bottle of medicated oil. He'd gotten it for me months ago when I'd twisted my ankle, going out of his way to find it. I had scoffed at him then. Sit down, I said, my voice gentle. Let me rub some on your shoulder. I reached for his hand, but he jerked back as if my touch burned. The distance in his eyes was sharper than any words. Clara, he said, his voice weary. Stop playing games. The words were a needle to my heart. I knew this wall of ice wasn't built in a day. My years of foolishness had eroded his patience until there was nothing left but bleak disappointment. I didn't push. I simply set the bottle on the nightstand. It's here if you need it. Then I picked up my pillow and walked to the narrow military issue cot in the corner of the room. The one he slept on whenever he came home late or after we'd had a fight. The double bed had always been mine alone. I saw his eyebrows twitch slightly as I settled onto the thin mattress. That night we slept in separate beds. The chasm between us was wide and deep, but for the first time I was on my side of it, determined to build a bridge back to him. When I woke in the morning, he was already gone. I looked at the nightstand. The bottle of medicated oil was gone too. A small, warm ember of hope glowed in my chest. He had used it. The storm of the divorce had quieted for now. But the war for my husband's heart was just beginning. The silence in the house after Liam left was a physical presence. It was different from the hostile quiet of before. This was the silence of a blank slate, and it was terrifying. I was alone with the ghost of the woman I had been, lazy, entitled, and perpetually dissatisfied. My reputation in the military compound was in tatters. The other wives had never liked me, a city girl who looked down on their simple lives and made no effort to fit in. Now with Sophia fanning the flames, I was a pariah. The story of my dramatic refusal to sign the divorce papers was already weaving itself into the gossip mill, twisted into a tale of my hysterical desperation. I had to go out for water. Stepping outside felt like walking onto a stage. A group of wives clustered by the communal pump, their chatter dying the moment they saw me. Their eyes, sharp and judgmental, followed my every move. I could feel their silent commentary as clearly as if they were shouting. Look at her, one of them, Mrs. Gable, said just loud enough for me to hear. The captain must have been cursed the day he married her. Useless thing. All she does is laze about and throw tantrums. In my opinion, another chimed in, he should finalize that divorce and marry Sophia. Now that would be a proper match. She's so kind and understanding." Their words were tiny, sharp knives, each one finding its mark. The old Clara would have flown into a rage, screamed at them and given them more ammunition to use against Liam. But the new Clara, the one who had seen the bottom of the abyss, kept her head high. I focused on the simple task of filling my bucket, the cool metal of the pump handle a grounding reality. The best way to deal with gossip wasn't to argue. It was to render it irrelevant through action. Back inside the empty house, I faced a more pressing problem. My pockets were just as empty as my soul had been. I had frittered away the allowance Liam gave me on frivolities with nothing to show for it. A sharp sense of crisis clawed at me. I couldn't depend on Liam financially anymore. Not if I wanted to be an equal partner, not a burden. I needed my own purpose, my own money. I sat at the table, my mind racing, sifting through the foggy memories of my previous life. What opportunities were there in this era, the early 1980s? What had I overheard, dismissed, or forgotten? Then it came to me. The fabric. A memory, sharp and clear, surfaced. Sometime this very week, the local supply and marketing cooperative had a major printing error. A whole batch of floral-patterned cotton had come out with tiny random white spots. In a time when cloth was precious and bought with ration tickets, this was a catastrophe. The fabric was deemed defective, worthless. They would eventually sell it off for a pittance as scrap just to be rid of it. But to my eyes that had seen decades of future fashion trends, those flaws weren't flaws at all. They were the beginning of the polka dot craze. They were character. A plan, wild and fragile, began to form in my mind. I ransacked the house, pulling out drawers, looking under the bed, in the pockets of coats I never wore. I gathered every note and coin I had stashed away, my hands trembling with a strange new energy. When I counted it all, I had 23 yuan and 50 fen. It was a sum, but I knew it wasn't enough. I needed capital. I waited all day for Liam to return, my nerves stretched taut. The hours dragged by. It was late, well past dark, when I finally heard his key in the lock. He came in, his broad shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He carried the faint, astringent scent of medicated oil mixed with the crisp night air. When he saw me still awake, waiting, he stopped short, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. "What is it?" he asked, his voice rough. Summoning every ounce of my courage, I stood and walked up to him. "Liam, could you lend me some money?" His expression shut down immediately, his eyes turning to chips of frost. I knew what he was thinking. "You want money for a train ticket home?" The displeasure in his tone was a familiar weight. "Clara, my allowance only stretches so far. I have to support you, send money to my parents. I can't keep funding your escape attempts every time you're unhappy." "I'm not running away," I said, my voice firm as I held his gaze. "I told you. I want to stay. I want to have a family with you. But you..." I took a steadying breath, my cheeks warming. "You ignore me in our bed. How are we supposed to have children if you won't even touch me?" The bluntness of my words startled him. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I want to start a business," I continued before he could recover. "A small one." He stared at me, his gaze sweeping over me as if seeing a stranger. "You do business?" The skepticism was thick enough to cut. It was a fair question. In the 2 years of our marriage, I had barely boiled water, let alone managed anything resembling enterprise. 100 yuan, I said, holding out my hand, my tone resolute. "Consider it a loan. I'll pay you back within a year. With interest." He fell silent, his dark eyes searching mine for a long, tense minute. He was looking for the lie, for the trick. He was looking for the old Clara. I kept my gaze steady, letting him see my determination, my desperation to be believed. Finally, without a word, he turned and walked into the bedroom. I heard the scrape of a drawer opening. He returned with a thick wad of bills bound by a rubber band. He carefully counted out 10 yuan notes and placed them in my outstretched palm. The paper felt rough and significant. "This is the last time," he said, his voice low and grave. "Clara, don't lie to me. Don't leave me so easily again." The unspoken plea in his words nearly broke me. He wasn't just talking about the money. He was talking about my heart, my commitment. This 100 yuan wasn't just currency. It was the very last shred of trust he was willing to gamble on me. I clutched the money to my chest. "I won't. I promise." That night, before he could retreat into the study, I brought him a bowl of hot broth I had carefully prepared. "Drink this," I said softly. It will warm your stomach. He didn't look up from the papers on his desk. Not necessary. I'm not hungry. I want to live a good life with you, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But you won't even give me a chance to try. He was silent for so long I thought he would ignore me. When he finally spoke, his words were quiet and final. Trust isn't built with words, Clara. You destroyed mine a long time ago. The rejection stung, but I didn't back down. I stood my ground, the bowl still warm in my hands. Then something shifted. He looked from the bowl to my face, and with a sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, he took it. He didn't drink it, just held it, the warmth seeping into his hands. Later that night he didn't go to the cot. He came to the bed. His touch wasn't gentle. It was forceful, almost frantic, as if he was trying to exorcise a demon or claim a prize he didn't quite believe was his. It was overwhelming, a tidal wave of pent-up emotion. But for the first time since I had come back, my husband was truly mine again. And in the dark, I didn't just endure him. I held on tight, my heart surging with a painful, hopeful joy. The next morning, with the combined 123 yuan and 50 fin burning a hole in my pocket, I ignored the curious and mocking stares and boarded the bus to the county town. I went straight to the Supply and Marketing Cooperative and asked for Director Wang, the man in charge of defective stock. He was a middle-aged man with a kind, puzzled face. When I, a young woman, told him I wanted to buy the flawed fabric, he looked at me with sheer disbelief. "Comrade, are you sure?" he said, scratching his head. "This batch is no good for clothes. It's only fit for rags. You'll be wasting your money." "Don't worry, Director Wang," I said with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "I know what I'm doing." I went to the back and saw the rolls of fabric. It was beautiful, vibrant reds, deep blues, sunny yellows, all marred by those random perfect white spots. I chose the boldest patterns. In the end, I bought the entire remaining stock, over 200 meters, for just 1 yuan per meter. It was a staggering amount of cloth. I hired a flatbed cart to haul my treasure back to the compound. When the cart, piled high with a riot of colorful fabric rolls, trundled into the courtyard, it caused a sensation. The wives gathered around, their mouths agape. Mrs. Gable was the first to speak, her lips pursed in a smug smirk. "Good heavens, Claire. Did you spend all the captain's money on this junk? What in the world are you going to do with it? Make cleaning rags for him?" A wave of laughter rippled through the crowd. I didn't get angry. I simply smiled. "Mrs. Gable, don't be so sure. In a few days, don't come begging me to sell you some." Then I turned and, with a strength I didn't know I possessed, began the long, arduous task of hauling the heavy rolls into my house, one by one, ignoring the whispers that followed me like a trail of smoke. The stage was set. Now I had to perform a miracle. For the next 2 days I was a woman possessed. The outside world, with its whispers and judgments, ceased to exist. My universe was the 4 walls of our home, now transformed into a chaotic workshop. Bolts of fabric leaned against every available surface, and the air was thick with the scent of new cotton and machine oil. I dragged out the old sewing machine I'd brought from my parents' house, a relic I'd once scorned as beneath me. Now it was my most precious tool. Relying on half-remembered styles from my future life, cinched waists, playful puff sleeves, elegant bow collars, I began to sketch. My drawings were clumsy, but the vision in my mind was crystal clear. I wasn't just making dresses, I was crafting armor. Armor to shield me from the gossip and a bridge to connect me to Liam. The whir of the sewing machine became the soundtrack to my redemption. I measured, I cut, I pinned, I sewed. My fingers, once accustomed to nothing more strenuous than turning a page of a novel, grew sore and pricked by needles. I didn't care. For the first time in either of my lives, I was creating something. The fatigue I felt at the end of each day was a good, clean exhaustion born of purpose. I lost track of time, of meals, of everything except the transformation of defective cloth into something beautiful. The red polka dot fabric became a vibrant, knee-length dress with a full skirt that swirled when I moved. The blue floral was fashioned into a more elegant, fitted style with delicate cap sleeves. Each finished piece, hung carefully on the wall, was a silent rebellion against the woman I had been. On the evening of the second day, the door pushed open. Liam stood on the threshold, frozen. His eyes, usually so guarded and quick to assess a situation, swept across the room, taking in the rainbow of dresses that now dominated our living space. His gaze traveled from the vibrant garments to me, covered in thread snippets, my hair a mess, but my eyes alight with a fire he hadn't seen in years. He stood there for a long moment, his uniform a stark contrast to the feminine riot of color around him. "You made all these?" His voice was dry, disbelieving. I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. I held up the red polka dot dress against my body. "Do you think it looks good?" His Adam's apple bobbed as his gaze moved from the dress to my face. Under the lamplight I knew I looked a mess, but I also felt alive, and I hoped he could see that. He quickly looked away, a faint flush creeping up his neck. "Yeah," he muttered, the single word gruff and awkward. It was the barest of acknowledgments, but to me it was a symphony. "It looks good," he added, his voice a little stronger as he stepped further into the room. His tall frame seemed to block out the world outside, and the air grew warm and intimate around us. "It'll look even better on you." Before I could process his words, he closed the distance between us. His large, calloused hands found my waist and lifted me effortlessly onto the sturdy wooden table next to the sewing machine. I let out a gasp of surprise, the sudden change in height leaving me slightly dizzy, forcing me to look up into his face. He braced his arms on either side of me, trapping me between the solid wood and the heat of his body. His masculine scent, starch, soap, and pure Liam filled my senses. I could see the steady, strong pulse at the base of his throat. The hem of the red dress, which he had just held up to me, now lay crumpled between us. He didn't say another word. He didn't have to. The intensity in his eyes, the possessive warmth of his hands, spoke volumes. The careful distance he had maintained was gone, replaced by a raw, undeniable hunger. That night, in our room filled with the fruits of my labor, we didn't just share a bed. We connected, and for the first time it felt like a beginning, not an obligation. The next morning I put on the red polka dot dress. I took my time, brushing my hair until it shone and pinching a faint color into my cheeks. When I finally walked out of the house, I felt like a queen stepping into her kingdom. The compound fell silent. Every pair of eyes locked onto me. The vivid red made my skin seem paler, my hair darker. The fitted bodice and flared skirt accentuated a figure I hadn't bothered to care for before. With each step, the skirt swayed, lively and radiant. I was a splash of brilliant color in their world of drab greens and grays. The lazy, perpetually scowling Claire was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her own worth. Mrs. Gable's mouth hung open, wide enough to catch flies. "Isn't that from that batch of ruined cloth at the cooperative?" "Yes, it is," I answered, my smile serene. "Remember what I told you, Mrs. Gable?" Her face flushed an ugly red, but no retort came. The evidence was walking right in front of her. Soon one of the younger wives, a timid woman named Mei Ling, edged closer, her eyes wide with admiration. "Clara, are you selling this dress?" My lips curved into a genuine smile. This was the moment. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and carrying. 15 yuan each. No bargaining. A chorus of gasps echoed around me. 15 yuan was half a month's salary for some. But seeing the dress on me, seeing the transformation it represented, made the price seem almost reasonable. The first to break was the regimental commander's wife, Madame Zhang, a woman known for her style and her family's wealth. "I'll take one," she declared, her tone brooking no argument. "I want the red one just like yours." With the first crack in the dam, the floodgates opened. A second wife stepped forward, then a third. In just one morning, all 20 dresses I had made were snatched up. My hands were filled with cash, a thick, satisfying stack of notes. I had not only recouped my initial investment, but I had made over 100 yuan in pure profit. I stood there, the money in my hand, and felt a sense of accomplishment so profound it brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't just the money. It was the victory. I had struck back at every lazy and useless label with my own 2 hands. I had earned my first bucket of gold, and with it, a sliver of my self-respect. That evening I sought out Liam. He was in the living room, pretending to read the newspaper. I walked up to him and held out 100 yuan. "Here," I said. "The loan. Repaid ahead of schedule." He looked from the money to my face, his expression unreadable, a complicated mix of pride, confusion, and something else I couldn't name. "Keep it for yourself," he said, not reaching out. "No," I insisted, pushing the money into his hand. We agreed. It was a loan. A business transaction. This time the independence in my voice wasn't a weapon against him. It was a statement of fact. This time he didn't refuse. He accepted the money, his fingers brushing against mine, sending a jolt of warmth up my arm. That night for the first time he didn't retreat to the study after dinner. He stayed on the sofa. I poured him a glass of water and set it beside him. He took the cup, his eyes never leaving mine. Then with a sudden fluid motion he set the cup down, his other hand snaking out to pull me down onto the sofa beside him. A few drops of water splashed onto the back of my hand, warm from his grip. His tall frame loomed over me, his shadow enveloping me completely. A slow, predatory smile touched his lips. "Weren't you the one," he murmured, his voice a low, teasing rumble against my ear, "who said you'd give me 3 sons?" My heart thudded wildly, a frantic bird against my ribs, but I stubbornly lifted my chin, meeting his challenging gaze. "Then give me the chance." He didn't answer with words. Instead, his actions were a language of their own. That night there was no restraint, no lingering resentment. It was as if a dam had burst, releasing 2 years of pent-up emotion. And I, no longer a passive participant, met him halfway, surrendering to him not out of duty, but out of a fierce, joyful want. Under the moonlight that soon hid behind a veil of clouds, our marriage truly began again. In the days that followed, my position in the compound underwent a quiet revolution. The wives who had mocked me now looked at me with curiosity and a newfound respect. They greeted me, asked after my health, and in roundabout ways, inquired when I might be making more clothes. I was no longer just Captain Vance's troublesome wife. I was Clara, the woman with the magic touch with fabric. Only one person looked at me with undiluted poison in her eyes: Sophia. I saw her watching from her window, her face a tight mask of jealousy as the wives paraded in their new, beautiful dresses. Her carefully cultivated narrative of my worthlessness was crumbling, and she couldn't stand it. The peace I knew was fragile. Liam had begun to trust me, but I didn't yet know how deep that trust ran. And I knew Sophia wasn't finished. She was a snake, coiled and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The happiness I was building felt as delicate as one of my new dresses, and I was terrified that one pull of the wrong thread would unravel it all. The calm was shattered sooner than I expected. Liam was scheduled to lead his team in a critical joint military exercise, one that would determine his future promotion. A cold dread settled in my stomach whenever I thought about it. In my previous life, this very exercise had been the beginning of his end. A mishap had led to his demotion to a remote, deadly border post. I couldn't let history repeat itself. I was vigilant, my senses on high alert, waiting for the blow to fall. It came on a deceptively sunny afternoon. Sophia showed up at my door, her smile as bright and false as a painted sun. She carried a small basket of oranges. "Clara, I heard about your incredible success with the dresses," she gushed, her tone dripping with feigned warmth. "I'm so happy for you." She stepped inside without an invitation, her eyes scanning my now tidy living room, the sewing machine prominent in the corner. "I know I was immature before," she continued, laying on the humility thick. "I said some things I shouldn't have. You mustn't hold it against me. If I hadn't lived through her betrayal once before, I might have been fooled." Now I saw the calculation behind every flutter of her eyelashes. I offered polite, non-committal responses, my internal alarms blaring. She sat for a while making inane chatter, then offered, "Let me help you clean up. You must be so busy with your work." "The house is fine, thank you," I said firmly. A flicker of irritation crossed her face before she smoothed it over. After a few more minutes of strained conversation, she excused herself and left. The moment the door clicked shut, I sprang into action. I knew her. She hadn't come to apologize. She had come to plant something. I searched the house methodically, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I checked under cushions, in drawers, behind furniture. Nothing. Then I went to the wardrobe. I pushed aside my few old dresses and reached into the pocket of a heavy winter coat I hadn't worn since last year. My fingers brushed against paper. I pulled it out. It was a folded map, printed on a distinctive, thick paper stock. A military map. My blood ran cold. It was the same kind of backup map that had been at the center of the mishap in my past life. Sophia had made her move. My hands turned to ice as I clutched the damning evidence. All she needed to do now was send an anonymous tip and we would be finished. Liam would be accused of a catastrophic security breach and I, found with the map in our home, would be implicated as a spy or an accomplice. My mind raced, panic a live wire under my skin. What could I do? If I went to the authorities and claimed Sophia had planted it, who would believe me? My word against the gentle, kind nurse Sophia? If I told Liam, would his newfound trust in me be strong enough to withstand this? As I stood there, paralyzed with the map in my hand, a sudden, urgent pounding shook the front door. Comrade Clara. Open up. Security Department inspection. My heart plummeted. They were here. It was already in motion. I opened the door to find two stern-faced men in uniform. Behind them, the courtyard was already filling with wives, their faces alight with morbid curiosity. And there, standing among them, was Sophia, her face a perfect mask of worried anxiety. But in her eyes, carefully hidden from the others, I saw the glint of triumphant malice. Chief Chen, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. What is the meaning of this? The head officer, Chief Chen, held out a formal document. We have received a report. You are suspected of possessing classified military documents. You will cooperate with our investigation. The moment his words fell, the courtyard erupted in shocked whispers. Hiding classified documents. Espionage. The gazes that fell on me were no longer just curious or disdainful. They were filled with horror and accusation. That's impossible. Liam's voice cut through the noise like a knife. He was striding across the compound, still in his training gear, sweat gleaming on his forehead. He must have run the moment he heard. He moved to stand directly in front of me, his broad back a shield between me and the security officers, his posture radiating protective fury. Chief Chen, he said, his voice razor-sharp and cold. I know my wife. She would never do such a thing. It was the first time he had ever defended me so publicly, so unequivocally. The gesture was so powerful it made my eyes sting. Chief Chen looked uncomfortable but resolute. Captain Vance, we must follow procedure. A search will determine the truth. From the crowd, Sophia spoke up, her voice carefully measured. Liam, I know you trust Clara, but since everyone is here, perhaps it's best to let the chief check. That way her name can be cleared. There it was, her signature move, pretending to help while driving the knife deeper. Liam turned and shot her a look so cold it could have frozen hell over. She visibly shrank back, silenced. The search began. The two officers moved through our small home. I stood frozen, my palms slick with cold sweat. Then I felt it. Liam's hand found mine. His grip was broad, dry, and rough with calluses, but the strength of it was an anchor in my raging sea of fear. It didn't take long. One of the officers emerged from the bedroom holding my old winter coat. Chief, he said. We found something. He reached into the pocket and pulled out the folded map. A collective gasp swept through the courtyard. Chief Chen's face darkened like a thundercloud. All eyes were fixed on that single incriminating piece of paper. I felt Liam's grip on my hand tighten convulsively. His entire body went rigid with tension. When he slowly turned to look at me, I saw it. A flash of cold, gut-wrenching disappointment and the raw pain of betrayal. Clara. My name was a whisper on his lips, but it landed on my heart like a hammer blow. I was just starting to trust you. Is this how you repay me? He released my hand and took a single step back. That small distance felt like a chasm opening between us, one I feared I could never cross again. The crowd's whispers swelled into a wave of condemnation. I knew it. A spy. Poor Captain Vance. Sophia covered her mouth, feigning shock, but her eyes shone with unconcealed glee. How could this be, Clara? How could you do such a thing? I ignored them all. My eyes were locked on Liam. This was the critical moment, the turning point that had destroyed him before. I would not let it happen again. Meeting his devastated gaze, I spoke, my voice slow, clear, and sharp as broken glass, carrying across the suddenly quiet courtyard. Liam Vance, I did not do this. Give me 3 days. In 3 days I will find the real culprit and expose them in front of all the leaders of the military district. My voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with a steely do-or-die resolve. The courtyard fell into a stunned silence. Everyone stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. Chief Chen's brows drew together. Clara Vance, the evidence is right here. How dare you still quibble? But Liam's eyes stayed fixed on mine, searching, probing the unwavering determination I poured into my gaze. Logic screamed that the evidence was irrefutable. But something in my face, the sheer force of my will, made him hesitate. He was weighing everything: the evidence, my strange behavior these past weeks, my promise. The entire courtyard held its breath, waiting for his decision. The seconds stretched, each one an eternity. Finally, he lifted his head and met Chief Chen's gaze. His voice was low, but it was unwavering, absolute. "Chief Chen, I believe my wife. I request that the organization grant me 3 days. I will work with her to uncover the truth. If after 3 days it is proven she did this, I, Liam Vance, will voluntarily resign my commission and accept punishment alongside her." Tears I could no longer hold back broke free, streaming down my face in hot, silent trails. He was gambling his entire career, his life's work, on me. Chief Chen stared at him for a long, hard moment, then sighed heavily. "Captain Vance. 3 days. You have 3 days. If there is no result, you will both face a military tribunal." The security officers withdrew. The gossiping wives scattered, buzzing with the new, shocking development. Sophia lingered at the edge of the crowd, turning back to give me one last look. Her eyes were icy with a confident certainty, as if she was already counting her victory. Inside the house, only Liam and I remained. The air was thick enough to choke on. Finally, he broke the silence. "Tell me," he said, his voice stripped of all emotion. "What is your plan?" I wiped my tears away, my resolve hardening into diamond. I stepped in front of him. "The first step," I said, "is for you to cooperate with me in putting on a show." He arched a brow, a silent command to continue. "From now on," I explained, "you have to act completely disappointed in me. Disgusted even. We need to have a huge, loud fight. The entire compound needs to hear it and believe you can't stand the sight of me anymore." "Why?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "To throw Sophia off her guard," I said, meeting his eyes squarely. "She planted that map. He's watching us right now. The only way she'll relax and make a mistake is if she believes her plan has worked, that we are broken." Liam was silent. Trusting me this far was a monumental leap. Asking him to believe that the seemingly kind and gentle Sophia was a venomous schemer was another shock to his system. "Do you have proof?" he asked, his voice edged with a barely perceptible struggle. "No," I admitted, shaking my head. "But my instincts scream that it's her." "Liam, do you trust me?" He fell silent again, the conflict raging in his eyes. I didn't press him. I knew the weight of what I was asking. Finally, he lifted his head. The struggle was gone, replaced by a clear, grim resolve. "All right, Clara," he said. "We'll do it your way. We'll put on a show." The silence that followed Liam's agreement was heavier than any argument. We were now co-conspirators in a desperate play, and the stage was our own home. That very night we unleashed the performance of our lives. "How much longer, Clara? How much longer will you drag my name through the mud?" Liam's voice was a roar, thick with a fury that felt terrifyingly real. He kicked the leg of the table, making the crockery rattle. "Haven't you embarrassed me enough?" I met his fire with my own ice. "Embarrassed you? Now you care about embarrassment? Where was that pride when you married a woman you clearly despise?" I snatched an enamel cup from the counter and hurled it to the floor. The shattering crash was immensely satisfying, a percussive beat in our symphony of deceit. It echoed through the thin walls, a dinner bell for every gossip in the compound. We fought about everything and nothing. My spending, his neglect, the bitter taste of our failed marriage. We hurled accusations we'd both held onto for years, but this time they were weapons in a shared strategy, not missiles in a personal war. By the end, with the house trembling from the slam of the door as he stormed out, I felt hollowed out. I slid down the wall onto the floor, the silence he left behind ringing in my ears. I knew countless ears had heard every word. Sophia's most of all. The next day I was a ghost in the compound. Women crossed the street to avoid me. Their whispers were no longer just behind my back. They were loud, condemning pronouncements. Traitor. Spy. I kept my head down, my shoulders slumped, playing the part of the defeated, disgraced wife. As I trudged back from the well empty-handed because no one would let me near the pump, I ran into Sophia. She swept toward me, her face a perfect painting of concern. "Clara, oh you poor thing. I heard everything last night." She laid a condescending hand on my arm. Don't be too hard on him. The pressure he's under with the exercise and now this. It's enough to break any man. I looked at her false compassion and let my carefully constructed mask slip. I allowed my shoulders to shake, letting out a broken, pathetic sob. He hates me, Sophia. He thinks I took that map. You're the only one who still talks to me. What am I going to do? A flicker of pure, unadulterated triumph flashed in her eyes before she smothered it. There, she soothed, patting my hand. It will all work out. Then she leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I heard something, just a rumor, mind you. I heard the security department may have found a new witness. Someone who can prove the map wasn't taken by you. My heart leapt. The bait had been taken. This was the piece of disinformation I had asked Liam to have his most trusted comrade Sergeant Miller, accidentally, let slip near the hospital ward. I clutched her hand as if it were a lifeline, my eyes wide with feigned desperate hope. Really? A witness? That's just what I heard, she said, her tone soothing but her eyes sharp, watching my reaction. Don't get your hopes up too high. But if it's true, your name could be cleared. Her words were calm, but the slight tremor in her hand betrayed her. She was frightened. The plan was working. There was no way she had acted alone. She would need to confirm this to silence the threat. She would go to her accomplice. For the next 2 days I perfected my role as the shattered wife. I wandered the compound looking pale and thin, pretending I couldn't eat. Liam played his part to perfection, leaving before dawn and returning long after dark, his face a granite mask of cold displeasure. We were 2 stars in a tragic play and the entire audience was convinced. On the 3rd day, the day of the deadline, the military district held its quarterly mobilization meeting. Every officer above battalion level was required to attend. As a nurse, Sophia would be there. It was the perfect arena to spring the trap. Before the meeting, the atmosphere outside the auditorium was electric with tension. Wives clustered in groups, and they scattered like startled birds when I approached, leaving me standing alone in a circle of empty space. Sophia, resplendent in her starched white nurse's uniform, held court at the center of a group of admirers. When she saw me, isolated and pathetic in my corner, her lips curved into a tiny, victorious smirk. She picked up a cup of water and walked toward me, her steps graceful and deliberate. "Clara," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine pity. "You look unwell. Here, have some water." I met her gaze, letting all the cold hatred I felt show in my eyes. "No." Her face stiffened for a fraction of a second before she recomposed her mask of concern. She sighed, pitching her voice to Carrie. "Clara, I know you're in a bad place, but you can't just give up on yourself." She paused for dramatic effect. "You know, I've always thought there was something strange about that map. The other day when I visited your house, I saw you sneaking something into your wardrobe. I thought it was some private treasure. Who knew it would be that? If only you had told me, I might have been able to help you." It was a masterstroke. On the surface, a defense. In reality, she was publicly cementing my guilt, providing an eyewitness account that sealed my fate. The crowd around us erupted in fresh outrage. "What? She saw it herself. It's true then. There's no doubt." Poor nurse Sophia, still trying to defend her. I became the focal point of 100 contemptuous stares. Sophia looked at me with the serene pride of a cat that has not only caught the canary but has been publicly praised for its hunting skills. Just then Liam strode over. When he saw me surrounded and Sophia with her innocent act, his brow furrowed deeply. One of Sophia's sycophants immediately rushed up to him. "Captain Vance, you must control your wife." Nurse Sophia was only trying to comfort her and she was cursed at. And now Nurse Sophia says she saw Clara hiding the map with her own eyes. What more evidence is needed? Liam's face darkened. He didn't even glance at me. He went straight to Sophia, his gaze piercing. "You saw it with your own eyes?" Under his intense scrutiny, she quivered but forced a firm nod. "Yes, Liam. I didn't want to say anything, I was so worried." He cut her off coldly, then turned his devastating gaze to me. The icy disappointment in his eyes was so potent, so real, that it felt like a physical blow, even though I knew it was an act. "Clara," he said, his voice flat. "Do you have anything to say?" My chest constricted. I bit my lip, letting a single traitorous tear escape, and shook my head. My silence was as good as a confession to the watching crowd. At that moment, the deputy political commissar of the military district, a stern high-ranking officer, happened to pass by. He stopped, his face thunderous. "Captain Vance," he barked, calling Liam aside. His voice carried easily. "This is the woman you vouched for? Look at the disgrace she's brought. And you, an officer who cannot manage his own household, who shields a wife suspected of espionage. Where are your party principles?" His public scolding was the final nail in my coffin. I saw Sophia's lips curve into a small, cruel, triumphant smile. She thought she had won. She thought Liam and I were utterly destroyed. The mobilization meeting began and the crowd filed into the auditorium. As a dependent, I was left outside in the echoing hallway, the weight of their judgment pressing down on me. Just before Liam stepped through the great doors, he looked back at me once. Our eyes met. In that fleeting glance, all the rehearsed anger was gone, replaced by a silent, fierce question. "Is it time?" I gave him the slightest nod. The real show was about to begin. I waited outside the auditorium, the minutes stretching into an eternity. The low murmur of hundreds of voices from inside was a dull roar, a beast waiting to be fed. I leaned against the cool wall, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. This was it. Everything hinged on the next few moments. Halfway through the meeting, the great double doors of the auditorium swung open with a weighty groan. Chief Chin from the security department marched down the central aisle, 2 officers flanking him, their expressions grave. The murmur inside died an instant, suffocating death. Chief Chin took the podium, the microphone amplifying his sharp intake of breath. "Comrades, please quiet down. Before we proceed, I must report a matter of the utmost importance concerning our military's security." The silence was absolute. From my vantage point at the door, I could see Sophia sitting bolt upright in the nurses' section, her back rigid, her face unable to conceal its eager excitement. She thought this was the moment of my public condemnation. After 3 days and nights of intensive investigation, Chief Chin continued, his voice echoing in the hushed hall. "The case regarding Comrade Liam Vance's wife, Clara Vance, suspected of stealing military secrets, has now been fully clarified." A wave of suppressed whispers rippled through the room. All eyes swiveled toward Liam in the front row. He sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable, a rock in a stormy sea. "Now," Chief Chin announced, "I will present a key piece of evidence we have just obtained." He nodded to the officer beside him, who produced a black, bulky tape recorder. The click of the play button was unnaturally loud in the silence. After a burst of static, a woman's voice, shrill and strained with panic, filled the auditorium. "Lu Bing, didn't you say there was no way we could be caught? Now Captain Vance says they found a new witness. What is going on?" It was Sophia's voice. Unmistakable. Her face, which had been flushed with anticipation, drained of all color in an instant. She lurched to her feet, her body trembling violently, her eyes wide with horrified disbelief as she stared at the recorder on the stage as if it were a venomous snake. Then a man's nervous, stammering voice replied, I don't know, Nurse Sophia. Didn't you say the captain and his wife were finished? How could this? I don't care." Sophia's voice on the tape snapped, vicious and sharp. "We're in this together. If I go down, you're not walking away from this either. Find out who this so-called witness is right now. And if you dare betray me, I'll tell them all about the money you took." The man's voice stammered back, terrified, "Nurse Sophia, don't worry. I'd rather die than confess." The recording clicked off. The silence in the auditorium was deeper than before, profound, as if the entire world had stopped breathing. The evidence was irrefutable, a bomb that had just detonated in their midst. Then the uproar began. Not whispers but shouts of shock and betrayal. No one could believe it. The gentle, kind, ever-helpful Nurse Sophia was not just a schemer, but a criminal who had conspired to steal military secrets and frame an innocent woman. Sophia collapsed back into her seat, her face a ghastly shade of gray. "No," she muttered, her voice a broken thread. "It's not me. It's fake. It's a fake." Chief Chen's cold gaze swept over her, final and condemning. "Sophia, Lu Bing, what else do you have to say for yourselves?" From the logistics section, a small, weaselly-looking soldier, Lu Bing, crumpled to the floor, his legs giving way beneath him. "Take them away," Chief Chen ordered, his voice like iron. Two security officers marched down and seized Sophia, who had gone limp, all fight and pretense gone, replaced by the numb despair of the truly caught. Two others hauled the weeping Lu Bing to his feet. As she was dragged past Liam, something in her snapped. She thrashed wildly, her hair coming undone, pointing a shaking finger at him, her voice a hysterical shriek that tore away the last vestiges of her disguise. Liam, it was you. You set this up. You did this to me. I loved you. I loved you so much. How am I worse than her? Tell me. How? Liam never even turned his head. He didn't grant her a single glance. His eyes found mine across the length of the auditorium, through the crowd, through the chaos. In that silent, powerful connection, 1,000 words were spoken. The relief, the vindication, the shared ordeal survived. The crisis was over. My name was cleared. Sophia, for framing an officer's family and attempting to leak classified information, was sentenced to 8 years in prison, stripped of her position and expelled from the compound. Lu Bing received 5 years. Justice, swift and satisfying, had been served. In the aftermath, my standing in the compound underwent a seismic shift. The cursed wife was now the resourceful heroine who had helped uncover a traitor. The women who had scorned me now came to my door, their faces sheepish, bearing gifts and stammering apologies. Clara, we were so blind before, saying such awful things. Please, you mustn't hold it against us. Who knew Sophia could be so evil? You can't judge a book by its cover. You and Captain Vance are a perfect match. We'll take a page from your book from now on. I accepted their gifts with a polite, distant courtesy and sent them on their way. I felt no urge to gloat. Having lived 2 lives, their shallow flattery meant nothing. The only opinion that mattered was waiting for me at home. That night, the house was quiet, filled only with the echoes of our recent victory. Liam sat on the sofa, a cigarette smoldering between his fingers, the smoke swirling around him, blurring his sharp features. I walked over, took the cigarette from his hand and crushed it in the ashtray. Stop that, I said softly. It's bad for you. He looked up, his dark eyes capturing mine. For a long moment he just stared, as if memorizing my face. Then he reached out, his movements slow and deliberate, and pulled me into his arms. He held me so tightly it felt like he was trying to fuse us into one being, his face buried in the crook of my neck. I'm sorry. The words were muffled against my skin, his voice raw and trembling. Clara, I'm so sorry. I froze in his embrace. This strong, stoic man who bled without a sound was apologizing to me. I shouldn't have doubted you. I shouldn't have misunderstood you, he whispered, his grip tightening. I wrapped my arms around his strong back, feeling the solid, reliable strength of him. It's over now, Liam. You don't need to apologize. It was me, he said, his voice thick with a regret I had never heard from him before. I was the one who didn't treasure you. I was the one who didn't value what we had. I was the one who pushed you away. He didn't say anything more. He just held me for a long, long time. And in the circle of his arms, all the distance, all the misunderstandings of 2 lifetimes, finally dissolved into nothing. The wall between us was gone. We were finally, truly on the same side. With the shadow of Sophia gone and the air between Liam and me finally clear, a new energy surged through our lives. The house was no longer a battleground or a stage for deception. It became a home, a true sanctuary. The silence was no longer heavy with resentment, but comfortable and warm, filled with the unspoken language of a couple rediscovering each other. Freed from the constant need to defend myself, I poured my energy into my clothing business with a ferocity I hadn't known I possessed. The small compound was no longer my world. It was merely my launching pad. With the profits from my first batch of dresses, I rented a small, sunlit storefront on a bustling street in the county town. I painted the walls a clean, bright white and named it New Dawn Boutique. The clothes I designed were a revolution in our conservative town. I played with colors and silhouettes that were fresh and bold, yet still elegant and wearable. I used the flawed fabric to create deliberate patterns, making the polka dots and unique bleeds a signature style. Word spread like wildfire. Women from all over the county and even a few from the provincial capital began to seek out my shop. They weren't just buying clothes. They were buying a piece of confidence, a touch of modern beauty. My business flourished. I hired 3 skilled seamstresses who had been laid off from a state-owned factory, giving them not just jobs, but a sense of pride in creating something beautiful. Within 2 years, I became one of the first 10,000 yuan households in the county, a title that filled me with a profound sense of accomplishment. I had achieved financial independence not through inheritance or marriage, but through my own vision and the work of my own hands. The respect I earned was tangible and deeply satisfying. Liam, unburdened by domestic turmoil and the threat of scandal, thrived in his career. His performance in the joint exercise, now untarnished by false accusations, was praised as exemplary. His leadership was sharp, his judgment clear. He was promoted ahead of schedule to deputy division commander. The man who came home each evening was still the strong, disciplined soldier, but the perpetual tension in his shoulders had eased. There was a new light in his eyes, a pride not just in his work but in us. We were the couple everyone talked about, but now the whispers were envious, not scornful. The officer with the brilliant career and the wife with the Midas touch. We enjoyed both love and success, a combination that felt like a dream. A few years later, I expanded to the provincial capital, opening 2 more New Dawn boutiques and establishing a proper brand. I was constantly busy traveling, meeting suppliers, sketching new designs. But no matter how late I returned, a light was always on in the window, and a pot of soup was always warm on the stove. Liam, now a division commander with immense responsibility, still found time for me. He would come home from commanding thousands and awkwardly learn to massage my sore shoulders as I bent over my design desk. He'd drape his uniform jacket over me when I fell asleep on the sofa, surrounded by sketches. Our love was no longer a dramatic, tumultuous fire. It had banked into a steady, enduring flame, woven into the simple, quiet routines of our life together. It was in the cup of tea he'd bring me, the way he'd listen to me talk about fabric sourcing, the silent, solid presence beside me in the dark. On my 30th birthday, Liam managed to get a rare full day off. He shooed me out of the kitchen and proceeded to create a minor disaster, eventually emerging with a table full of slightly charred but lovingly prepared versions of all my favorite dishes. After dinner, as I was laughing about the state of the kitchen, he grew quiet. He reached behind a cushion and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. In that era, such a thing was an almost unimaginable luxury. He got down on one knee right there in our humble living room. The lamplight caught the silver streaks at his temples and the profound solemnity in his eyes. "Clara," he began, his voice deep and sure. "When I married you, times were hard. I had little to give you but my name and a heart that was too stubborn to show itself. I wronged you in so many ways." He opened the box. Inside, a single beautiful diamond sparkled. "Now I want to propose to you again. Will you do me the honor? Will you marry me one more time?" Tears welled in my eyes, spilling over and tracing warm paths down my cheeks. I was looking at the man I had loved and lost, the man I had fought so hard to win back. I held out my hand, my fingers trembling slightly. "Yes, Liam Vance," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I do. In any life, I will always say yes." He slid the ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of our second chance, a promise forged in the fires of regret and redeemed by unwavering choice. Not long after, Liam started acting strangely. He'd hover near me, open his mouth to speak and then close it again. He'd stand in the doorway in his uniform just back from headquarters, and watch me chop vegetables with an intense, unreadable expression. Finally, one evening as I worked on a new design, he pulled up a small stool and sat beside me, his silent staring becoming so unnerving I had to put my pencil down. "Liam Vance," I said, turning to face him. "What is it? You've been like a cat on hot bricks for days." He cleared his throat and I saw, to my astonishment, a faint blush creep up his neck. "Clara," he said, his voice unusually hesitant. "Don't you think it's about time we started a family?" The question hung in the air between us, simple and profound. I looked at this strong, brave man, who was suddenly looking at me with the vulnerable hope of a boy. My heart swelled until I thought it would burst. I reached out and took his hand, lacing my fingers through his. "Yes," I said, my smile spreading across my entire face. "I think it's well past time." The following spring, our first son was born. We named him Liam Kai. "Kai," Liam explained, his voice rough with emotion as he held the tiny, swaddled bundle for the first time, "because it means triumph." And his arrival is the greatest triumph of my life. The day I went into labor, the man who could lead troops through simulated war games paced the hospital corridor like a caged tiger, his face ashen. When the nurse finally placed our red, wrinkled son into his arms, this pillar of the military, this division commander, stood frozen, utterly terrified and more in love than I had ever seen him. From that day on, Liam's world had a new axis. He learned to change diapers with the intense focus of a field strategist, though he often ended up as messy as the baby. He attempted to prepare formula with mixed results, the kitchen often looking like a flower bomb had gone off. The entire compound chuckled at the sight of the formidable Commander Vance being utterly conquered by a 10-pound infant. He didn't mind. The moment he stepped through the door each evening, he would sweep Kai into his arms, his stern face softening into a look of such tender, unguarded joy it made my heart ache. When Kai turned 3, I discovered I was pregnant again. The ultrasound revealed 2 flickering heartbeats. Twins. Liam, upon hearing the news, went completely still. He sat down on the hospital bench and didn't move or speak for a full 5 minutes. I nudged him gently, a little worried. "What's wrong? Not happy? We're getting a 2-for-1 deal this time." He jolted back to reality, grabbed my hand, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Happy? I'm overcome. Later I gave birth to a boy and a girl. We named our son Liam Chin, the enduring one, and our daughter Liam Nu, the promise." "A promise," Liam whispered to me as we looked at our sleeping daughter, her tiny hand curled around his finger. "Once made must be kept. I promised you a life, a family. And now she is that promise made flesh." Our home became the liveliest, noisiest, most wonderful place in the entire compound. A few more years passed, and Liam achieved a rank I once could only have dreamed of, becoming one of the youngest generals in the military. But at home his stars and titles meant nothing. His position in the household hierarchy was firmly at the bottom. One perfectly ordinary evening, I returned from a long meeting at my garment factory. I opened the front door and stopped, taking in the scene of beautiful chaos. In the living room, our 8-year-old Kai was leading a charge with his 5-year-old brother Chin. They had constructed an elaborate fortress out of couch cushions and toy blocks and were now launching a full-scale assault with their toy guns. "Charge. Seize the high ground. Cover me, brother." Blocks and plastic soldiers were scattered across the entire floor. Their faces were smeared with my best lipstick, which they were using as camouflage war paint. And in the center of the maelstrom sat General Liam Vance, my husband, cross-legged on the carpet. Our daughter Nu was perched behind him, a pink plastic comb in her hand, diligently attempting to weave his short salt and pepper hair into a series of lopsided braids. "Daddy, don't move," she commanded in her milky little voice, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You'll look so pretty when I'm finished." Liam's face was a masterpiece of silent, patient despair. He caught my eye over the rampart of cushions, his expression one of utter, helpless pleading. Leaning against the doorframe, I burst out laughing. This was the true apex predator of our household, a 4-year-old girl with a plastic comb. One pout from Nu, and the great General Vance would surrender all his principles. I clapped my hands together. "All right, soldiers. Cease fire and prepare for chow time. And you, General," I said, grinning at Liam, "you may rise from your throne." The 3 children erupted in cheers and hurled themselves at my legs. "Mommy's home." Liam finally managed to extricate himself, his hair a hilarious mess of tiny, failed braids, his face still streaked with traces of red lipstick. He looked at me, his eyes full of a weary, helpless, all-consuming fondness. "Thank heaven you're back," he sighed, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "Another 5 minutes and they would have decommissioned me entirely." I laughed, reaching up to wipe the last of the lipstick from his cheek. "You've worked hard, General Vance." That night, after the 3 little whirlwinds were finally asleep and the house was quiet, I rested my head on Liam's chest, listening to the steady, strong rhythm of his heartbeat. His arms were around me, his chin resting on my hair. "Clara," he said, his voice a soft rumble in the dark. "Sometimes it feels like I'm dreaming." I hummed in response, snuggling closer. "I always thought my life would be nothing but duty and command," he continued, his fingers tracing slow circles on my back. "Just me alone. I never imagined this. A home so full of noise and life. Having you, having them, it's more than I ever thought possible." He tightened his embrace, holding me as if I were the most precious thing in his world. It's so good. Having you. Having them. I lifted my head in the dim light and found his lips kissing him softly. I smiled against his mouth. The shadows of the past, the regrets, the mistakes, the pain of a life wasted, had long since blurred, fading into the distance like a half-remembered dream. The happiness before me, built with patience, forged in fire and filled with the echoes of our children's laughter, was real. It was tangible. It was complete. My world was not just full. It was overflowing. There was nothing, absolutely nothing more to regret. The end.